The Casualty Care in the Classroom program came out of a tabletop exercise in the winter of 2013-14 that was mediated by the FBI. Basically what we asked was what happens to the patient from time of injury until time safe for EMS to enter and care for that patient. The time safe was the operative word in that phrase. This really got the attention of the school administrators when it was defined to them that time to safety could be minutes to hours to even potentially days given the situation. So in looking at that problem, like many others had, it would be easy to fall into frustration. But where many would fall into frustration, we actually fell into collaboration. We had the local law enforcement as well as the local fire department, EMS professionals, the local school district, and several doctors from the hospital all got together. We all sat down with like minds and did our homework. What is out there for this scenario? How can we bring this education to the school teachers who are in that situation to help deal with that situation? Or how can we insert people into that situation in a safe and efficient manner? So anytime you try to bridge the gap of a large diaspora, that's a big word for me, but it's a big gap. What you try to do is approach it from both sides. When we got together, having done all our research, what we found was that there was really no guidance, no guideline. There was no Hartford 3 or Third Compendium. There was no Stop the Bleed campaign. There was no Beacon. There was nothing of that sort out. There was the concept of the Rescue Task Force, which is something that had been in our area since the Confined Threat Escort Tactics paper was published in the Tactical Edge in 2001. So the Confined Threat Escort was not naive to us, but it's something that we hadn't trained on any sort of a scale. So the Casualty Care in the Classroom program came as one end of building that bridge. And that end of building that bridge, basically we looked at the research from the Global War on Terror. What kills people in the first hour, what kills people in the first hour that we can prevent, and we focused on that. We want to train on what kills people in the first hour that we can prevent. Looking at that, it's largely hemorrhage control with a little bit of airway and a little bit of tension pneumothorax kind of thrown in the mix. So what materials do we need to service this particular population? We're talking about high school all the way down to pre-K, to the Montessori schools and even some first starts. So you're looking at a 1-year-old all the way up to 18, 19, 20, or any of the adults or staff in the school. So we built our kits around that concept, made it very pediatric friendly. We made it very friendly to the novice provider, that it doesn't require a lot of training. It doesn't require a lot of baseline knowledge or preparation, but it does require some, of course. And we trained it in 45 minutes using people already invested in that situation. We did it on a train-the-trainer platform so that if Tuscaloosa, Alabama wants to do this, then Tuscaloosa, Alabama Fire, EMS, and Police are training Tuscaloosa, Alabama school teachers. So it's very hands-off from my point of view, and very hands-on from the people invested in that situation. Nobody knows your own backyard like you do. It's something that any of us can agree upon is the safety and well-being of our children. And there's of the utmost importance for all of us. So it's something that was very easy to get everyone to agree to achieve. The program's grown quite a bit since we initiated it. We started it with a beta group, if you will, of our own people in our own backyard, because that's where we're invested, and started sort of radiating out from there. Over the course of the last 2.5 years or so, we've trained between 4,000 to 5,000 school staff how to stop life-threatening hemorrhage across 9 states. So it's definitely out there. I still see no program like it in the country. It's 45 minutes. It's train the trainer. It's down and dirty. It's pretty inexpensive and rather rudimentary in the tools that are in the kit itself, but they'll absolutely save a life. As a side benefit, the knowledge that is obtained through that training doesn't stay in the classroom at 3 o'clock either. It goes home with those individuals who are then going out to movie theaters and malls and places of worship and other places where they just live their lives. So I hope none of them ever have to use it, but should they encounter the situation where they need to stop somebody's bleeding, I know that they know how. And I know that they'll rise to the occasion and do just that, or rather resort to their training and do just that. In our kits, we have a rolled gauze, a ACE rep, an instructional card, a couple pairs of gloves, and we chose to use the SWAT T tourniquet. The kit is itself packaged in a about yay big plastic package, which is intentful in its use of plastic to be used as a chest seal device or a makeshift chest seal device. We considered many different options to put in the kits, but in the effort of blanketing the school, having them everywhere somebody could seek shelter, and to do so in a cost-effective, training-effective manner, there's some things that didn't quite make the cut, but that's the basic kit. So here's the other end of that diaspora. It's the other end of the bridge. So within that situation, right, we want to train the people within the situation how to deal with the situation, and we also want to train people how to get into that situation in a safe and efficient manner. So the Rescue Task Force concept has been around for some time. First evidence I can really find of it is Confined Threat Escort. It was published in the Tactical Edge by the NTOA, I think winter of 2001. As it so happens, it was published by a guy that I work with on a very regular basis. So we knew the tactic. When we made that commitment as medical directors to mandate that training for our first responders, the question then became, where do we train it? How do we train it? How do we train the hands-on component of that? The sort of natural progression of Rescue Task Force within our community was we need to be training TECC. There's no offering for 100 miles any direction for us, so if it's going to be trained within 100 miles, it's going to be us training it. And we also had a need for true TEMS training. So we live in Wisconsin. It's cold there. Can be. We have two seasons, winter and construction. So we live in Wisconsin. It's cold there. They're always looking for climate-controlled environments to train within. We are very fortunate that we have a CEO who understands what we do and the importance of it. Mercy Health is a not-for-profit. They're a community-based hospital. They have trauma centers and stroke centers and all of this stuff, but everything they do, they strive for excellence. So when they chose to take on and endorse the EMS component, their pre-hospital component of healthcare, they strive to do it with excellence. When I asked for a small space, a room or two where we could do some active movements and training, what we got was 25,000 square foot of indoor climate-controlled training space. It was old operating rooms that were not being used. So there's 4 operating rooms, pre-op, post-op, locker rooms, lounge. We have set up within there an ER, mock ER, a big office space with dividers and quite a maze. It's a real challenge. A movie theater, a church, 2 classrooms, boardroom, the lockers, and an apartment, actually, a small studio apartment set up in there as well. It's all furnished up, but it's not littered, but there's stuff in the rooms you actually have to move through and deal with and work around, as well as all the low fidelity and high fidelity simulators. We have, I think, 6 high fidelity simulators at this point. One of which is Caesar. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's one of 2 in civilian hands. Military like to train with him. Apparently you can drop him 2 stories out of a helicopter and he'll be fine. I haven't tried that yet. I'd really like to at some point, but we haven't tried that yet. Our mannequins bleed, they holler, they scream, and we get live action players to come in and role play as well. So we can control the lights, the fire alarms, smoke. We can train it however we want to and make the maze as challenging as we want, and we can do it right there at the hospital in a controlled learning environment. it's again, we're a not-for-profit public service type of hospital, so it's only logical that our local SWAT teams, our local sheriff's department, our local folks come in and use it. We have the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill is using the facility this next week. NTOA comes in and trains with us with the TEMS component of it. It's busy. What do I see as the big deficiencies in tactical response within the community? There are several. We're in our infancy as a nation in trying to address this problem. The problem's not going away. It's getting worse. It's becoming more frequent. It's becoming more violent with bigger numbers and getting to be a bigger and bigger problem daily. For those individuals who say it could never happen here, they need to open their eyes, because it most certainly can happen there. Anywhere it's ever happened, they've said it can never happen here. And there it happens. The line between red and blue needs to make purple. So firemen and law enforcement officers traditionally, as a boots-on-the-ground operation, tend to work fairly well together. Traditionally, there is some difficulty within cooperation at a management level amongst different public service entities. Why that is, we could talk all day about that. But these scenarios are forcing communities at all levels to combine their response. They need to be trained jointly with a like mind and a like goal and common terminology. So that raises another point, and a recent exercise that we went through in training together as a group. The law enforcement personnel in the room radioed out, said, we have 37 victims, which in the EMS world translates to we have 37 injured people, and if they're calling them a victim, they must be injured pretty badly. However, in the law enforcement world, 37 victims means, oh sure, they're victims. They're victims of a crime. There wasn't anybody injured in that room. Very, very different how we deal with 37 people in a room that aren't injured and 37 people that are badly injured in a room. So there's lots of room for improvement within the communication side, but the training needs to come in a joint operation. And I think that is one of the biggest shortfalls right now. We're trying, we're just not there. The other big shortfall I see right now in our preparation as a nation for these issues is the public education of hemorrhage control. Stop the Bleed campaign is out there. Beacon is out there. Their Alert Level 2 is out there. There are some startups that are trying to get people interested in hemorrhage control, but we are today where we were with CPR in the 1950s and 60s. You know, there was no bystander CPR. There's really no bystander hemorrhage control to speak of, nothing in an organized fashion. Many people, if you took a survey of 100 people and asked them, are tourniquets good or bad, you know, you would probably get a pretty good mix of folks that would say that tourniquets are bad, because that's what we've known for so long. So we as a nation and as public servants have a duty to educate our public as to the need, the efficiency, and the how-tos and whys of hemorrhage control by bystanders. And somebody asked me, how do you get everybody to play together, basically? I said, yeah, that's a real challenge, because you get so many personalities in the room. I have a fire chief of this chair. That chair right there. It's a small chair, but it has its own fire chief. There hasn't been a fire on it for 400 years, but there's a chief, and he's the chief, and that's the chief's chair. That's his chair. That's what he's chief of. So when you get personalities and egos that get bigger than actual jurisdictions and problems, you have huge barriers that get in the way. It was a comment that was very well received and thought of. But what I would say to people that are trying to get any sort of tactical response built in their communities, the question is, where do you start? And what I what I would suggest to you is that particularly if police and fire on an operational or an administrative level don't necessarily coalesce around the same ideas well, they don't play well in the sandbox, you need a third party in there that you can unite behind. And the one that has worked well for me and my experiences in our communities is the school district. Who can argue with doing something right for children? For your children, for our children, who are in the same classroom. And I think when we find common ground, it's much easier to find common goals. So if you're having trouble getting things up off the ground and started, start with the schools. And use the schools. Not only do they need the education, the school teachers themselves, maybe the students need education in hemorrhage control as well. I'd love to do that. But they are common ground that everyone can rally behind to have common goals and come up with a common plan to take care of this problem that we all face.